The lights inside the debate hall dimmed slightly as the camera systems locked in, ready to capture another night of carefully rehearsed speeches and tired, calculated arguments. It was a cold Washington evening outside, but inside the room, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation, waiting, twitching, like a bowstring pulled back just a little too far. Straining for release, Jasmine Crockett adjusted the microphone in front of her, not out of nerves, but precision. She never moved without purpose. Her notes lay still. She hadn't needed them all evening. She knew her material by heart, and more importantly, she knew why she was here. Not to win applause, not to throw slogans into the wind. She was here to speak for the people whose voices no longer echoed in rooms like this one. Across from her, Donald Trump leaned slightly back in his chair with that signature half-smile, the kind that hovered somewhere between confidence and dismissal. His presence was undeniable, magnetic to some, repelling to others. But it was his unpredictability that made the room lean forward. Every time, the debate had gone on for nearly an hour. Talk of inflation, global instability, immigration, the same questions, the same runaround, until Trump inevitably veered off script. The moderator, trying to corral the discussion back into the safe lane, glanced nervously from Trump to Jasmine. And then it happened. No one could say exactly what triggered it. Maybe the sharpness in Jasmine's tone rattled him, or maybe he'd been waiting, salivating for the right chance to strike. It came barely 10 minutes into her segment. Trump leaned forward suddenly, his voice rising just above the civil register the room had spent so much energy maintaining. "You know, Jasmine," he said, his words coated in sarcasm. "You talk a lot about justice and fairness, but you're just another puppet. They put you up here to check a few boxes, make some noise, cry oppression, same old playbook. You don't belong on this stage." Gasps. A few stifled ones, one or two blatant, even reporters, usually stone-faced, shook their heads behind their laptops. Fingers paused over keyboards, mid-key. The room wasn't breathing. Jasmine didn't move. Not a twitch, not even a hard blink. Trump wasn't done. "And the way you defend that disaster of a presidency before me, Obama. Please, that guy did more damage to this country than anyone besides maybe you, and we've all been cleaning up your mess ever since. You should thank me. You got famous because I existed." It was the kind of insult designed to hit 5 nerves with one slap. Race, gender, ability, competence, and loyalty. Trump wasn't shooting policy critique anymore. This was personal, designed to rattle, meant to pull Jasmine into a shouting match where there'd be no winners, only sound bites. But Jasmine didn't rise. Sitting tall in her seat, her hands folded before her like marble folded into skin, she simply turned her eyes to him, and she counted in her head. 1. The room murmured. The moderator's voice came in, dry and cracked like old paper. "Congresswoman Crockett, you." She raised one hand gently, not to silence the moderator, but to own the quiet. The room obeyed. To Trump, perhaps sensing she wasn't going to react, scoffed out loud and leaned forward again, opening his mouth. 3. No words came from him. Pure muscle memory had failed. Why wasn't she saying anything? 5. The audience wasn't leaning back anymore. They were leaning in. 6. Cameras panned slowly, taking in the subtle widening of pupils, the flicker of breath across Trump's nostrils as confusion found a crack in his facade. 7. Journalists were back at their keyboards now, but they weren't typing Trump quotes anymore. They were documenting silence, documenting power. 8. She turned her head, her gaze sharp and clear, angled only a couple of degrees in Trump's direction, like a solar panel turning toward light. Not in offense, in awareness. 9. Trump flexed his jaw, brow tight. 10. And Jasmine blinked once, just once. 11. Then the smallest smile, not of joy or pettiness, but of truth, pulled at the corner of her lips. 12. Double quotes. "Mr. Trump," she said. Her voice was weightless, not because it lacked force, but because it floated above everything he had just said. "You've spent a decade dodging questions, but I'll only ask one. It's simple. What did you do with the The words didn't ring. They pounded. There was no movement in the room, just sound, and the sick sinking realization that none of them saw it coming. Trump's body, which had, until that moment, radiated smugness, froze. No twitch, no smirk, not even the loud exhale of someone proud of what he thought was a clever jab. Just a frozen moment of time in which a dozen social contracts simultaneously shattered. The moderator glanced at their papers. Security by the door tilted forward slightly. Ivanka, seated 3 rows back, blinked hard. Not once, but twice. "I'm sorry," Trump finally said after a full 3 seconds of dead silence. But the tone wasn't dismissive now. It was confused, defensive, shaken, and for Donald Trump, that was new. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't enlarge her body. She didn't bite on follow-up jabs. She leaned forward, just a bit. "I don't need to yell," she said, because when a woman's been in a room with dangerous men long enough, silence becomes her strategy, and questions become her weapon. And then she folded her hands again. He had nothing. The camera caught him blinking, caught the fast flick of his tongue, licking his dry lips when no words came. Behind Jasmine, a voice from the audience, somewhere back left, whispered, just loud enough to be picked up by a boom mic. Damn. That was the shift point. The second tone of the evening broke open like a damn dot, and still, she did not move. Trump shifted in his chair for the first time. It wasn't more than an inch, but it was everything. The man who had steamrolled debates with sheer force of will, the one who had turned sarcasm into spectacle and mockery into momentum, was now sitting quietly under the weight of 6 words that cut deeper than any policy critique ever could. What did you do with Ivanka? The crowd hadn't moved. No one was rustling papers or checking phones. Even the cameras hesitated. Slow, unsure, almost afraid to miss a single wrinkle in the moment unfolding. It was the opposite of chaos. It was stillness charged with lightning. Jasmine's words had created a pressure drop in the room, like the second before a storm. But Jasmine, she just waited. She let the silence fester because she knew that sometimes the truth doesn't need to be explained. It only needs to be known. She wasn't there to argue. She wasn't there to entertain. She was there to expose the diseased roots underneath all the performance. Trump's mouth twitched. A subtle flinch, like a man bitten by something sharp but invisible. He turned his head, eyes momentarily darting toward the audience, then to the left where Ivanka sat motionless, her lips pressed in a tight line she hadn't worn all night. For a moment, father and daughter didn't make eye contact, and that, everyone noticed. "Excuse me," he finally muttered, but it wasn't a full sentence. It wasn't composed. It wasn't in command. Jasmine didn't move to answer or repeat her words. She didn't need to. The power wasn't in the volume. It wasn't in the debate points or applause lines. It was in the question she had dropped like a grenade beneath the table, and she was watching who would flinch first from the blast. The moderator cleared their throat, voice cracking faintly. "Congresswoman Crockett, if you could clarify, are you making an accusation?" A tap in the audience, a pen hitting a notebook, and then nothing. Absolute nothing. Even CNN's live feed, Mike picked up the thrum of nervous breathing near the soundboard. Jasmine turned her face back forward. No longer focused solely on Trump, but addressing everyone without addressing anyone. "I asked a question," she said simply, "and whether he chooses to answer it or not, well, that's revealing, isn't it?" A low murmur flickered through the crowd. Not gasps, not commotion, just the recognizable buzz that comes when people start thinking about something they didn't want to. Trump sat back again. His eyes took on a quick hardness, a stage fighter's desperation. In his world, silence was losing, and he wasn't about to lose. "That's disgusting," he snapped. "This is what politics has become. Personal attacks, fake smears. I've built businesses, changed economies, led through disasters." "Exactly," Jasmine interjected softly. The first time she had interrupted anyone all night. Trump stopped mid-breath. "That's what makes it so terrifying," she finished. A few seconds passed. A shiver electric slid over the shoulders of the audience. They were no longer watching a debate. They were watching 2 timelines crash together. Old power, armed with deflection, and new courage forged in patience. Ivanka, composed but pale beneath the strong shadows of the spotlight beside her, remained unmoving, but her fingers had begun to slow drum against her thigh. "One knuckle at a time." "I won't dignify that with a response," Trump said, his tone dipping colder now, stiff with restraint. "You're not just disrespecting me. You're dragging my daughter into baseless conspiracy, trying to create tension for your own gain. That's pathetic. This is beneath you, assuming you were ever above anything." He thought he was reclaiming the moment. His voice was louder, trying to grab the floor again. But the room wasn't reacting the same way anymore, because the room wasn't his anymore. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I didn't mention a conspiracy," she replied, slow and even. "I asked about your conduct. You're the one who made it personal. You curled your lip and threw daggers as soon as I stood with my truth. And now, suddenly, you're the victim." She paused, then almost whispered, "You ever notice how abusers always want grace they've never given?" Trump leaned forward, hands tightening around the edge of the podium, and Jasmine leaned back. It was more than a physical gesture. It was symbolic campfire-level storytelling. It said, "I don't need to chase you. You're coming undone, all by yourself." A camera caught it. A single still frame, crystal clear, Trump red-faced, leaning in like a man begging for war, and Jasmine leaning back, calm, detached, and undefeated. It was tweeted within the minute, overlaid with text. 12 seconds later, she destroyed him. The tweet went viral before the debate even ended. The moderator's voice wavered. Let's return to domestic policy topics. Ms. Crockett, do you have a response specifically regarding the economy?" Jasmine nodded, offering mercy to the room. "I do." She didn't need to pursue the question further. That would have made her look like she was pushing theatrics. Jasmine had learned how these things moved. She knew that you don't need to hammer the nail if the world already heard it drive through the wood. Let them talk about their jobs and supply chains now. The damage, the meaningful kind, had already been done, but Trump wasn't done with her. Not yet. As she began calmly discussing wealth disparity and hollow tax reform, Trump cut in loudly, off script and visibly rattled. You think people like you can just accuse a man on stage of anything without proof. He snarled. Our country isn't run on rumors, it's run on results. And I get results. Unlike you. Jasmine turned slowly. You're mistaken, she said. This country was run on results. But then you showed up and taught people how to lie louder than leaders. Told them character doesn't matter. That truth is an inconvenience, not a compass. You shook our moral foundations. I'm just asking why. Trump exhaled sharply. A woman 2 seats behind the moderators broke decorum with a whisper. Not quite silence, not quite a statement, but audible enough for everyone. She's pulling the curtain back. The woman muttered, and he's standing there, naked. The moderator attempted to step in. Trump shouted across the floor. This witch wants to distract, divert from real issues, because she has nothing else to stand on. I don't need to stand. Jasmine's voice rang, not loud, but cut with diamond precision. The weight of your fear speaks louder than any rebuttal I could give. And this time, this silence had nothing to do with waiting, that it had everything to do with awe. The room was still trying to catch up, and Trump was clearly trying to recover lost ground. But recovery wasn't something you declared, it was something you earned. His usual rhythm, the bulldozing cadence where he'd speak fast, overpower, interrupt, dominate, that wasn't working anymore. Because none of it mattered now. Not after Jasmine took the floor and made silence the loudest thing anyone had heard all night. She didn't wield sound. She wielded stillness. The kind that forces confrontation. The kind that draws out uncomfortable truths. Trump had tried to steamroll her with volume. She had built an entire arena beneath him with quiet control. From across the room, a young journalist watching on the press dais looked at her partner and mouthed, "She's doing it without shouting." And we're still shaking. But as Jasmine continued her economic response, pointing to the real cost of inflation not in numbers but in missing opportunities and broken promises, Trump kept fidgeting. His right hand clenched, then opened slowly. He was holding on to his temper by the threads. He shouldn't have brought up Obama. He definitely shouldn't have made it personal. And most of all, he should never have underestimated that Jasmine wasn't here to beat him at his game. She was here to end it entirely. Finally, when Trump raised his voice again, it wasn't strong. It was shaky. And that was new. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? He said, pointing now. Everyone here's afraid to say it. But you don't respect this country. You hate what made it great. You hate people like me. Wrong. Jasmine cut in. Trump blinked, slightly thrown. I don't hate people like you, she said steadily. I pity them. A soft gasp rolled through the crowd, like wind brushing low grass. Trump's posture stiffened mid-statement. Jasmine continued, calm as ever. Because men like you think what you've built is strength. But it's not. It's fear, stacked high in gold plating and lawsuits. You fear being irrelevant. You fear being forgotten. So you yell, you mock, you lie. Not because you're strong, she paused, lifted her eyes directly into his. But because, deep down, you know you're small. There were no cheers, no applause, just the kind of stunned, sacred silence that television networks can't bottle. Jasmine didn't dominate the space like he did with noise. She dominated it with presence. And presence has weight. Trump shifted again, uncomfortably, as if the floor beneath him had changed. It had. He wasn't on home turf anymore. Because now, he wasn't performing for his base. Now, he was defending his ego from collapse. The moderator flinched, opening their folder. Let's pivot briefly to foreign policy. But the question barely landed before Trump raised his hand. Wait, he said. No, I want to answer that. He turned, leaned forward, pointing directly toward Jasmine. Business owners, police officers, working Americans, they've thanked me. I made them proud again. I fixed what others broke. You call that fear? You didn't make them proud, Jasmine replied. Elegance slipped over steel. You made them angry. You told them everyone else stole what they had never worked for to begin with. You didn't build a movement. You built a mere room of resentment where everyone heard their pain. But no one was given healing. And you just walk in here acting like you know better. Trump charged. No, Jasmine cut in gently. I walk in here honoring the truth that was ignored the moment you decided your voice deserved to be louder than facts, than decency, than history. The audience didn't make a sound, but their stillness spoke volumes. And then she made her move, because the moment no one expected wasn't the Ivanka question. It wasn't even the silence, it was what she did next. I wasn't going to bring this up tonight, Jasmine said, and now her voice changed, lower, steadier, like someone dimming the lights in a house before telling its secrets. I figured maybe this country deserves one quiet evening that doesn't end in shock. Trump stiffened. But since you chose to bring families into this, she continued, gaze hardening slightly, let me name the truth you've kept buried under 6 layers of PR damage control. The entire room went breathless. You talk about loyalty, she said, but your own staff have written memos, sir. Documents, first-hand accounts, that if even a fraction of them are true, then it's not just corruption or fraud that haunts your legacy. She leaned in. It's your treatment of women, including those closest to you. Trump's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His hands twitched like they were looking for something to grab. I am a woman, Jasmine said, and I see through you in a way most men can't. You're twisting narratives, Trump muttered, his voice lower now, less thunder, more trembling. Am I, she asked, or am I forcing your mask to slip? Just enough so people can finally ask who you really are behind the bravado. The moderator looked panicked. Let's please stay on track. Candidates, but Jasmine didn't press further. She had already said the part that mattered, that it was like watching a surgeon make one cut and walk away, confident that time would do the rest, and time was doing the rest. Trump fumbled through his next answers. The bravado returned, but it was brittle. His voice had edges now, sharp ones. His jokes didn't land. His asides weren't charming, they were desperate. Every time he shifted in his seat, people noticed. Every time he laughed at himself in that boastful way, they saw the panic bleeding in around the edges. Jasmine, on the other hand, answered her next question clearly, not with fire or rage, but with conviction built on facts, anchored in lived experience. She didn't need to drag him back into that hole, because he was already trying to claw his way out. And failing, at one point, one of the other candidates attempted a jab at her, a throwaway comment, probably meant to redirect attention. But not tonight, because Jasmine's momentum had turned her into something bigger than the stage. She wasn't debating anymore. She had become the moment, and moments like that don't fade with the next headlines. They become history. Backstage, even staffers were whispering. She ended him. Producers scrambled to clip highlights on the fly. Meanwhile, Trump tried to move past it, but every word he spoke afterward, every pause, every boast, was now haunted by the question everyone couldn't unhear. What did you do with a question, just a question. And yet, it had undone a decade of armor. Because sometimes you don't need to accuse someone to expose their guilt. You just have to ask the question they were never prepared to answer. The debate was still technically ongoing. The moderator asked more questions. The candidates gave more answers, and the cameras continued to pan across the stage. But anyone who had been in that room, and anyone watching at home, knew the dynamic had completely shifted. It wasn't about policy anymore. It wasn't even about performance. It was about presence. And there was only one person on that stage who truly had it now. Jasmine Crockett wasn't talking louder. She wasn't gesturing wildly. She wasn't making bold promises with big numbers. She was just still, conscious, controlled, and somehow, impossibly, larger than the room she was in. She had struck a nerve that no one else dared to touch. The kind of nerve that didn't just change the tone of a debate, it changed how people talked about power. The kind of nerve that made viewers press pause on their TVs and ask each other, did she just say that? Not because it was shocking, but because it was true. Meanwhile, Trump was trying to recover. His smile was back, but it had tension behind it. His answers came with extra rehearsal, like he was forcing himself through bullet points to keep from spiraling. But it was there, the spiral, lingering in his eyes, in the hard swallow between in the tightening skin at the side of his mouth. Nothing Jasmine said had been proven. Nothing Jasmine said had been shouted, but everyone knew, whether they admitted it or not, this wasn't just a political takedown. It was something deeper, a collapse of illusion. She didn't accuse, thus what the political analysts would say later. She didn't reveal secret evidence or force confessions, but she made everyone wonder. No one was wondering about tax plans anymore, or border policy, or infrastructure bills. No one remembered the talking points that Trump had spewed earlier in the evening. They only remembered the look on his face when he heard that question. That timing, 12 seconds after he tried to insult her, she dismantled him without raising her voice, and everyone in the audience had felt it. Jasmine had done something no one does in these arenas. She made silence into a sword. She didn't perform vengeance. She commanded discomfort, and it worked. People didn't tweet about facts that night. They tweeted about shifts. Something had moved, and they didn't have the vocabulary for it yet, but they could feel it. Audience members at home sat on the edge of their couches. Some leaned in so hard they barely noticed their own hands trembling. Viewers didn't know they were watching something historical until it was already over. That's how true power recalibrates everything. Back in the debate hall, Ivanka sat frozen. You wouldn't know it unless you were watching her closely. Her posture remained perfect. Her chin precise. Her makeup still intact. But her eyes, those had changed. Not fear, not rage. Something more, calculating. As if wheels had turned suddenly in her mind, as if some part of her knew what Jasmine just planted wasn't going to evaporate when the cameras turned off, because questions don't need answers to cause damage. Some questions are the damage. And behind the camera line, even media producers were already drafting headlines. Jasmine's power move silences Trump. 12 seconds that changed the debate trajectory. Jasmine crashlands Trump's ego. Still, no recovery. But Jasmine didn't need the headlines. She was already ahead of them. Her next speaking segment began with a policy answer to a healthcare question. Crafted, informative, empathetic. She spoke about real families, real systems that had failed people. She explained glucose price jumps with more clarity than most analysts. But everyone noticed something else. She wasn't on the defense. She didn't have to be. She wasn't talking at Trump anymore, because now, quietly but clearly, he was orbiting her. When he tried to interrupt, people sighed. When he laughed sarcastically, the audience didn't join him. Jasmine wasn't just heard. Now she was protecting the gravity of the room, and the uncomfortable truth settled over him. Like fog, his dominance had left the room, and it wasn't coming back tonight. For once, his name wasn't the engine of the moment. Jasmine's measured restraint was, "I came here tonight," she said in response to the final prompt. Not to win over a debate stage, but to voice the exhaustion of an America that's been screaming without being heard. She paused, looked not at the moderators, not at Trump, but right into the centermost camera. And we're tired of being told we don't understand our own pain. Tired of leaders pointing fingers while our lives get smaller and harder. Another pause, timed with unshakable precision. We don't need more noise. We need someone who knows how to sit in the quiet, listen to the struggle, and then actually do something about it. The mic didn't drop, but it didn't have to. Across the stage, Trump's jaw flexed once before, slowly locking again. He looked like a man late to realizing he'd just walked into the wrong fight, against the wrong person, and tried using the wrong weapons. Because Jasmine hadn't destroyed him with accusations, she'd destroyed him with presence. Trump's last line of the night barely registered. It was angry, rushed, something about leftist lies and woke nonsense. Words that once carried fire now sounded like the faint buzzing of a TV left on in another room. Jasmine nodded once, politely, because even when you're winning, you don't have to gloat, you just let the silence do what it does best. Speak truth to volume. When the debate ended, the crowd didn't surge for autographs like they usually did. There wasn't a standing ovation, just stillness, a kind of collective breath held in awe, unsure of what they'd just seen. Trump exited first. That wasn't unusual, but this time, there were no cameras swarming him, no flashes popping, just faces, watching, waiting, measuring him with brand new eyes. And that was the damage he had come to dominate, and left defined by her by 12 seconds. Outside, as Jasmine quietly exited, no embarrassment, new spectacle, no entourage flooding her wake. Someone whispered from the press row, she didn't just win, she rewrote the rules. No one remembered what came before those 12 seconds. And no one would ever forget what happened after. A light drizzle had crept into the night as people filed slowly out of the debate hall. It should have felt like any other post-debate atmosphere. Reporters chatting into cameras, pundits racing to upload takes, campaign staff lining up soundbites like dominoes. But that night, it felt suspended, like no one wanted to say too much, too fast. For fear of breaking the spell, because it wasn't just a shift in political talking points. It was a shift in how power looked. For so long, Trump had been the storm. Loud, unrelenting. The weather system people planned their arguments around. Like it or not, when he walked into a room, he demanded gravitational pull. But tonight, Jasmine Crockett had changed that physics. With 12 seconds of silence, and a question steeped in calculated restraint, she had collapsed the scaffolding of his control. Not by shouting him down, but by creating space he couldn't control, a space for truth. And what scared everyone most was how natural it had seemed. She didn't do it like a politician. She didn't do it like someone chasing Twitter trends or 24-hour outrage. She didn't even flinch when the numbers game shifted, because her power that night came from something different, something older, something uncoachable. It came from knowing what it means when you've been silenced, and learning how to master silence in return. Inside the green room, afterward, campaign managers scrambled to figure out what damage had actually been done. "It's nothing," one of Trump's aides said too quickly. She asked a random question with no basis. "That'll burn out fast." But another turned the tablet toward them. A live poll, updated in real time from viewers online. Question of the night. What did Jasmine mean? Trending across every platform, because America didn't need evidence to start asking. They just needed someone brave enough to finally pose the question out loud. Out in the hallway, Jasmine didn't linger. She never did. Her team knew better than to hover for post-game victory laps. She wasn't celebrating. She was focused. She gave handshakes, made eye contact, thanked the staff behind the cameras. And then, as she exited through the side corridor, a woman, mid-40s, black, glasses fogged from the rain, waited quietly with both hands clasped. They locked eyes briefly. "You said what needed saying," the woman whispered. Jasmine nodded, soft but sure. "I just said what everyone's been too scared to risk losing to ask." Behind her, the door swung closed, releasing the faint hum of applause from the side theater. But Jasmine didn't turn around, because applause wasn't the goal. Awakening was. On the news that night, coverage ran like smoke across the nation. Networks dissected the 12-second pause like it was a film. Scene. Body language experts slowed it down frame by frame. Psychologists were invited onto panels. And viewers, millions of them, replayed that moment again and again. Because something about those seconds felt dangerous in the way truth usually does. Memes were created, remixes dropped before sunrise, but layered beneath the virality was a deeper cultural moment. Someone had finally stood toe-to-toe with Trump, and rather than rise to his chaos, they let him fall into his own reflection. He had insulted her, casually, predictably. His insult carried all the arrogance, sexism, and racial overtones that had defined too many political stages before. But Jasmine, she didn't catch the stone he threw. She chose to bend reality around it, and from that silence, a new kind of thunder was born. One that didn't need noise to resonate. One that didn't need firepower, only precision. Trump may have left the debate unfired from the stage, but in every living room across the country, viewers had seen it. The moment when silence wasn't just golden, it was devastating. For the next week, press coverage refused to let it fade. Articles with titles like, "The 12-Second Masterclass in Psychological Politics When Jasmine Crockett Shut Down," "The Most Powerful Man in the Room Silence as Strategy," "What Politicians Can Learn from Crockett," somewhere, buried deep between commentary and clickbait, America's collective consciousness began to feel that quiet weight. Jasmine hadn't just left Trump speechless. She had taught America how to hold space again, how to stop answering bullies on their own terms, how to fire a shot without raising your voice, and how to turn silence into a sentence with no rebuttal. What did you do with Ivanka? Maybe the question was never meant to be answered. Maybe it was only ever meant to be asked. And in asking it, Jasmine cracked something open. Not just in Trump's carefully branded armor, but in everyone who realized that night. There are moments when truth doesn't need proof, that it only needs courage. And with 12 seconds, she gave it to a nation starving for it. Asterisk if that moment shook you like it did the nation, if you believe in truth over volume, and if silence used like a scalpel speaks louder than any shout, then you already know this isn't just a debate. It's a shift. So if you're ready for more stories that expose, empower, and reclaim the narrative, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. Your voice matters. And every story we tell here, we tell it for the people finally being heard. Thanks for watching. Stay bold, stay awake. We'll see you in the next one.